Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And we are back. Thomas is a little high-pitched
We're
today.
back.
I'm Thomas. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that, in my opinion, is frequently misunderstood, and it's best interest of the child. Now, if you're in family court and you have minor children, you probably know this term. Best interest of the child is the term, at least in California, that the courts use to guide their decisions on custody and parenting plans and all that kind of thing.
And I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe that every state has some form of best interest of the child standard.
Right. Every state probably has some form of it. However, just know Thomas is an attorney licensed in California. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about California terms specifically, although there are a lot of times similarities state to state.
And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about applies in most states.
Yeah.
See your local practitioner.
Your local attorney.
Before you make any decisions that have a legal consequence.
This is not legal advice. This is all our disclaimers up front.
Right. Right.
This does not constitute attorney-client privilege and should not be construed as legal advice.
Right. Well, I think to digress, the purpose of the podcast is to help people to get through the process.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a legal question, you really do need to either read your local statutes or consult with a local practitioner.
Right.
Right.
So talk to us about a best interest of the child, because I know this is a term that, obviously in California comes up a lot. And a lot of my coaching clients in particular, they'll have situations where something's going on at the other parent's home and they're thinking, this isn't in the child's best interest.
That's right.
Or
letting them eat chocolate.
Or I also have clients who will use that phrase a lot in their communication because they think it gives it some kind of teeth. They'll say, well, in the best interest of the children, please make sure that they get to bed by, 8 p.m. or whatever. Something that really has nothing to do with this.
And another digression that's very transparent.
Right.
Everybody knows what you're trying to do. Don't do that.
Right.
Don't communicate like that.
Right.
But essentially, the best interest of the child is a legal term of art, which means it should be used carefully by non-lawyers. And that gets back to what we just said about using it in your parent-child, your co-parenting communication.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the standard that most jurisdictions have for making decisions on things like parenting plans, custody, and other legal matters like which school shall the child attend and what religious services and that kind of thing. And these, the court does have a lot of discretion in making these decisions, but it's not like the court can just pull a solution out of the ether. The court has to follow the statutes that are enacted in every state. Every state has its own child custody or family law statutes. This is not a federal level. There's no, the Congress of the United States doesn't have any jurisdiction here. It's state law that determines this. And in applying state law, the best interest of the child standard is governed by whatever statute is in your state.
Well, and I think as a parent, as a non-lawyer parent, let me just say, I think when we hear best interest of the child, the first thing that pops in our head is, what's good for our kids? What's the thing that's good for our kids? And so that's why we tend to think of it as applying in simplistic ways like food and bedtime and all these kinds of things that really don't have anything to do with this.
Or they should eat vegan, or they should or should not get vaccinations.
Right.
It can be a lot of things. And these are things that parents argue about. Like early in my case, there was an argument over whether my ex-wife should homeschool the children,
Right.
or whether they should go to public school. And I was on the public school side, not because I didn't trust her, although it may have been in the back of my mind, but I felt that these particular children needed socialization,
Right.
and they would not get that in their mother's homeschool.
Right.
So, and that kind of determination is not generally what is meant by best interest of the child.
Right. So what is meant, Mr. Lawyer, in your most explainable terms, your most simplistic terms, help us understand what it is, what it does mean.
Right. So my mentor in litigation, a man named Joe Truce, one of the finest lawyers I've ever known, frankly. And he used to say, "What are you going to do? Take a wild guess?" And the answer was always, "No, I'm going to read the statute."
Right.
So here's what the legislature, we don't have to guess. The legislature tells us what it's concerned about. In California, it's Family Code Section 3020. And the statute reads as follows: the legislature finds and declares that it is the public policy of this state to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of children. So health, safety, and welfare, and we can unpack that a little bit. So health, safety, and welfare generally, not always, but generally refers to issues of adequacy of parents. So in other words, if we have a parent that sends their kid to public school and doesn't abuse, alcohol and drugs and
or the child,
and doesn't abuse the child and doesn't neglect the child, then in general that base is covered. We've got health, safety, and welfare of the children. The way I like to describe this is the court's main concern is, are the parents adequate?
Yeah, and I like to say you're keeping them alive. That's essentially, that's a very crass level explanation, but that's essentially it. Is adequacy means, are you keeping them alive, fed, protected, and not abused,
Right.
And abuse doesn't mean, again, frequently, and I'm sorry I don't mean to derail you, but this is very, very frequent, particularly in the coaching side. I think that people have this concept that, well, abuse is yelling at them. Okay, well, from a psychology perspective, is verbal and emotional abuse a real thing? Yes. I endured it my first marriage. I get it. I know. From the legal perspective, is that considered abuse? Not really.
Not really. Yeah. It can be, the voice can be used as a weapon and so forth, but
it's not usually something that we see the court give enough consideration for it to impact their decision on the best interest of the children.
It would really have to be over the top.
Yeah.
And some people are over the top. They are just, crazy.
But we've had situations where people scream and cuss and all kinds of stuff, and they still have parenting time.
That's true. That's true. And in particular, cussing is it's mainstream these days, and
Right.
it's not a huge concern.
Right.
But in general, what I like to say is those types of concerns are one polarity. The court can consider the parenting styles, but in my experience, they really don't have time to take that deep of a dive.
Well, and also you have the right to raise your kids the way you see fit.
That's true.
There is some autonomy built into our parental rights.
Right. So I like to say, if the base is really covered if you don't have child welfare intervening to put a safety plan into place.
Yeah.
or to make recommendations regarding parenting classes and whatnot. If there's no child welfare involvement and there's no reason for child welfare, because sometimes people don't get caught, right?
Right.
But in general, it's the kind of things that child welfare agencies would be concerned about,
Right.
which is basically people chaining their children to bedposts and not
Locking them in cages and
not feeding them properly, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of stuff that falls under that rubric.
right.
We're not generally talking about a dispute between whether bedtime should be 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock.
Right.
So,
Right.
and the other concern, the other biggie, I should say, is a concern that we call frequent and continuing contact. And this is the part of best interest that's really misunderstood, in my opinion, because people think that it really means to be the better parent.
Right.
And that's only true tangentially. But here's what the statute says.
Well, it's subjective also. Being
Yeah.
the quote unquote better parent is subjective because what's better to me might not be better to you.
Right. Well, I'll tease what I'm about to say and say that the court sees good parents as people who disengage from conflict and are willing to share parenting with the other parent.
Right.
That's what a good parent, under the best interest standard, that's what a good parent is
Right.
somebody who is generous about parenting time.
Right.
Here's how the statute puts it. The legislature finds and declares that it is the public policy of this state to ensure that child have frequent and continuing contact with both parents after the parents have separated or dissolved their marriage or ended their relationship, and to encourage parents to share the rights and responsibilities of child rearing in order to effect this policy, except where the contact would not be in the best interest of the child. So that last disclaimer is for the situation where, dad's a falling down drunk or mom is a heroin addict. It's
Right.
there. In extreme situations, there are some parents that really you don't want the child to have frequent continuing contact with.
Right.
But for the vast majority of you out there, frequent and continuing contact is the number one thing that the court is analyzing after basic safety.
Right. Right. And that's why the person that tries to restrict the other parent's parenting time or is selfish with it will a lot of times be the person that's determined that should get less parenting time. Like
Right.
the court will, will be like, well, I'm not going to give the parent that's withholding more parenting time because the child's never going to see the other parent.
Yeah.
But if I give the parent that's willing to be generous the parenting time, I know that I'm assured that child is still going to have the other
Right.
parent in their life. So it's sort of paradoxical the way that works because
Right.
it's like, hold on loosely, right? It's like the 38 special song.
That's right. Hold on loosely.
Yeah.
See, we get all our wisdom from rock songs. Tammy and I do. We love rock and roll, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but it's true. If you're being generous with the other parent, then the court that's built into this statute.
Right. Right.
Because you're supporting frequent and continuing contact with both parents.
Right. So when I was, in the course of my career in family law, I've attended a number of those continuing education classes.
Right.
And in one of them, we had a woman come in and give like a entire day seminar on best interest of the child.
Mm-hmm.
And she came, her qualification, a PhD, and she had all the research. I still have, that was about like 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, it was probably more than that.
And I still have my little binder from that day because it's all in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you in a nutshell, the studies, what they do is they study children based on certain desirable outcomes, like doing well in school is a big one. Promiscuity and making good decisions about sex is another one.
No drug and alcohol use.
Drug and alcohol use,
Mhm.
general, freedom from things like depression and anxiety.
Right.
So there are these markers that they've chosen for successful parenting.
Mhm.
And what the studies seem to all show, I mean, they're very divergent in their findings, but the one common thread is that children that have both parents involved in their lives tend to do better.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that
Hence the statute, right?
right, and the legislature made that fine, and they conducted hearings. And all
Right.
that. This is in my view, this is a good law for divorce.
Right.
This law does ensure the best interests. And what's interesting about it is it's not just any time. Yeah, a father could take their kids to Disneyland every weekend. And there's a parody of that. It's called Disneyland Dad.
Right.
And the idea is you get the good times and the bad times. So you get to go to Disneyland. You get to go to the beach and dig holes in the sand. So see a prior episode called Digging Holes in the Sand.
Right.
So you get to
Although we don't have one called Disneyland. Maybe we should do that.
Yeah. But you also have the hard part of parenting,
Right.
which involves
Homework.
discipline. I had to whisper that because I suck at it.
That reminds this is a funny story that has nothing to do with this episode, but I'm just going to throw it in here for entertainment purposes. Thomas's son, his younger one, whatever. I'm his stepmother, but
oh, is this the whispering story? Okay.
When he was about 2, I would say, he picked up the term crackhead. Now, I don't know where he got that exactly. That could have maybe come from one of my teenagers at the time or something. But he was in the back seat of the car in his car seat, and the other child, who's 11 months older, was in the other car seat. And Thomas was driving. I wasn't with them. And the child was saying crackhead over and over. And Thomas said, if you say crackhead one more time, I am going to pull this car over and give you a timeout. And he said, all of a sudden from the back seat, he heard crackhead.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought of when you said discipline. Right. And so he subsequently pulled over and gave the child a timeout. But
so let me tie that in. That if I had allowed him to get away with that, he would have lost respect for my authority.
Right.
I had to follow through on that threat.
Right.
And with nothing but love in my heart and with kind of a smile in the back of my face, I didn't slam on the brake. I was about to say slam on the brakes, but I pulled the car over in a very
abrupt manner,
in a very energetic way. And I got out of the car and I got him out of the seat and I gave that kid a timeout
on the side of the road.
and I did it in a way that kind of, I wanted him to be afraid.
Yeah.
I wanted him to feel like if I do this, Dad's going to lose his cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You want him to learn not to defy you.
Right. Yeah. You can't let your little kids defy your authority with impunity. You have to have a consequence.
Yeah. If you let your 2-year-old defy you, you've lost all control by the time they're 15 or 16.
And that's good parenting.
Right.
That's just good parenting. We had a situation one time where the boys put some things in their pocket when we were in line to check out the grocery store.
Right.
And so I took them when I found out what had happened, because kids are not very subtle.
True.
So they had strange items. And when we finally got to the bottom of what happened, we drove back to the grocery store and we asked to see the manager. And I made them confess what they had done to the store manager. Because I'm not raising shoplifters.
Right, and then we paid for the items.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I am not raising shoplifters.
Right.
And that's good parenting.
Right.
So, where was I going with that?
You were tying it back to your best interest.
Best interest of the child. Because both parents have to do this.
Right.
You have to. This is the downside of I hate disciplining the kids. I just love them so much.
I know.
I hate taking things away from them. I hate giving them restrictions.
It's hard.
I hate. One time I had to take away a party or a birthday party or something.
Yeah.
And it's just I find as a parent that was gut-wrenchingly difficult.
It's also difficult because sometimes then, like recently we had a situation where both of your boys were grounded for about 2 weeks, which is, I mean, they're 17 and 18. It's pretty unusual for us at this point, but there was a significant violation that we felt had to be addressed. And so, but that means like for 2 weeks, they're here, they're in the house, they're not going anywhere.
Right.
They're doing all those things. So it can feel a little bit like punishment to you as well as the parent. So,
that's right. That's right. I'd rather have them at the party. Honestly.
Yes. I'd rather I be gone.
But the point is that children need to learn to respect authority.
Right.
And that's why we have so much crime in our society today, in part, is because, kids disrespect their teachers, they disrespect the police.
Yep.
And we have to teach them to respect. And the best way to do that is for both parents. If you're not going to stay married, then that has to be practiced in both homes. If one parent does it and the other one doesn't, it can create problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's ideal if you have both. But I will say that I think that we have had the stricter household many situations where your ex-wife didn't. And I think, it's ideal if both parents can do it. And I agree with you that you want both parents to do it. But honestly, if the other parent isn't doing it, all the more reason that you need to be very consistent about your discipline. Because if they're not getting it on either end,
that's a problem.
That's going to be a real problem.
So you want the statute says frequent and continuing contact, which means that they spend not just Disneyland time,
right,
but time doing homework and time, bedtime stories are good. There are ways to foster connection, because at the end of the day, these children are looking to us to decide what kind of adults they want to be.
True.
The studies show that you get a better adjusted child. Also, the biggest enemy in the studies, the biggest enemy of child welfare in co-parenting relationships is conflict between the parents.
Right. Conflict between the parents is the worst thing for the child.
Yeah.
That's why that's where we start. When we start working with somebody or on the coaching or the law practice or whatever side of the business they come in on, that's one of the first things that we're doing is how do we eliminate that conflict between the parents?
Correct.
Because that's the number one worst thing for the kids, according to all the studies and all the education that we've had around the issue.
Right. It's in the best interest of the children that we have conflict. So what do we have so far? We have the health, safety, and welfare. We have frequent and continuing contact, and its corollary, which is no conflict.
Right. And I want to piggyback on something that you said earlier, which is you were talking about, Disneyland dad and kind of parents having, involvement in school and homework and all these things. We have had a couple cases lately where the parties were already separated. And one of the things they were doing is dad was primarily taking weekend time and not really weekday time. So dad's not involved. And right now, these are younger children in like single digits. And dad's not really being involved in homework and all those other things. And one of the things that we really talked about in both of these cases is this might be working right now. The child's young. But when the child's a little bit older, they start getting 10, 11, 12. They've got friends. They've got other things happening. And you've just been the weekend parent. Yeah. Then what happens is it starts being, well, I want to go with my friends on the weekend.
Right.
So I'm not going with the other parent, which is usually dad. And then they've come to learn to rely on the other parent, which most of the time is mom, for my needs through the week. Like, oh, I forgot my shoes. Oh, can you give me lunch money? Oh, can I? And so you have one parent that's handling all the responsibility and the other parent that's handling all the fun. And when the kids transition to where that fun becomes their friends and not you, you have lost your role.
That's right.
And that's the problem with it long term. And that's why it's important, and that this is part of, the the legislature is that involvement in all aspects of the child's life,
Right. Yeah.
including the responsibilities.
Well, that's not in the statute, but it's in the research for sure.
Okay, sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah.
And
And
that's why it's in all of the experts and all of their reports and everything, is
Right.
because that's important to have both parents involved in all that.
well, maybe we should flip it. When the court is doing a best interest of the child analysis, the best way to lose that case is to attack the other parent or to be stingy with visitation or to, one of the things that the court really has a nose for, I find, is when it's about the other parent.
Yeah.
When it's about she is just crazy and
Right.
all she does is nag and all she does is talk to the kids and complain and what the court decides is that this person does not support the other parent's parent-child relationship. If you look at the cases interpreting this section,
Right.
you see that the court wants you to support them.
Yes. And from her side, it sounds like this. Well, he's a narcissist and he manipulates and controls and, he bullies the children into things and he, that's what mom is saying. And, even if those accusations are true on either side, it's not going to garner you any favor with the court. I find that if there really are things like that going on over the long haul, the parenting plan will find its equilibrium, based on the actions of each parent. So it's a long-term game. It's not a short-term game.
Right.
You have to kind of let the true colors of that other parent show to the court. And a lot of times, especially in the very beginning, we're so anxious to look what they're doing, look what they're doing, look what they're doing.
Right.
Point our finger at the other person.
Right. And I find a lot of lay people do that, like dirty diapers is something you hear from parents of young children. Well, he returns the children and their diaper always needs change. I have yet to see a court make a custody decision on the basis of that.
Right.
Okay, if the children are being raised in a totally unsanitary condition where it endangers their health, you got a problem.
Right.
But if he doesn't change diapers as often as you do, that's one of those let it go things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Especially a lot of times we hear that is when they're meeting at a neutral location because there's all this conflict.
Yeah.
That issue seems to come up in those situations.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, he put the child in the car and then drove 20 minutes to the location. The child can use the bathroom during that time. It's just, it's hard to. So you read the other two parts A and B of the statute. Part C says when the policies set forth in the subdivisions.
Sorry. I moved
Thomas
it.
is moving the screen. I'm trying to read.
I was trying to be helpful.
When the policies set forth in subdivisions A and B of this section, which are the two that Thomas already read, are in conflict with each other, in other words, a court's order regarding physical or legal custody or visitation shall be made in a manner that ensures the health, safety, and welfare of the child and the safety of all family members. So again, if there's some issue that creates conflict between best interest of the child and frequent and continuing contact, then the court is
or safety,
the safety,
not best interest.
I'm sorry, yes, not best
in
interest.
making a best interest analysis,
because paragraph A is off the screen now because you scrolled. But yes, if the health, safety, and welfare and frequent and continuing contact are in conflict with each other, then the court has to err on the side of the health, safety, and welfare.
Right.
So if I have...
So the kid doesn't die.
Right. If I have safety concerns, then that overrides the frequent and continuing contact policy.
Right.
But if I don't have health, safety, and welfare concerns, which again are not things like bedtime or brushing your teeth.
i.e. adequate
or
parents.
eating vegetables.
Yeah,
it's
right.
I'm keeping them breathing, alive, fed, and free from abuse. Okay, that's the health, safety, and welfare component. Then if those things are all taken care of, then the court is making their orders based on frequent and continuing contact.
Right.
as the most important piece
And
with
you know,
both parents.
and you know what's cool about that? It's something that's entirely within your control.
Right.
Your parenting and your support of the other parent in co-parenting matters is entirely within your control.
Right.
And that's what Tammy teaches her coaching clients.
Right.
Because what we all do, because we're getting a divorce, is we want to attack the other parent
Yep.
and prove that they're inadequate.
Or that we're the better parent.
Or that we're the better parent.
Yes, because we think that better parent is the threshold, and it's not.
Right. And what the legislature is telling us is, I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
Long as there's no abuse and
Right.
everybody's fed and safe, I don't care.
But what I do care about is, are you bad-mouthing that other parent to the child?
Right.
Are you telling the child that, one of the big things that a lot of parents do that's kind of controlling is the child gets this barrage of, I'm going to misuse at the transition point.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I hear parents struggle with, that because they think, well, I want the child to know I miss them. I don't want them to feel unloved. That's not what that does for the child. What that does for the child is make the child worry about you.
Correct.
And what you have to do is say, I love you. I mean, I think it's okay to say, I'll miss you. I love you. I'll miss you. Have fun with the other parent.
But not,
I'm going to miss you so much. Oh, blah, 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 blah.
starting to cry.
Yeah. And
I've
we've
seen
that.
I've seen moms lose custody
Yep.
after a display like that.
Yes. Yes. And I think these issues are sometimes how people get themselves into hot water, because they're trying to bring in things that are more, well, this person doesn't feed the children correctly, or
Right.
this person, talks about me to the child, or talks to the child about things they shouldn't, or, all these types of things. And while those are concerns for the court, it's not the concern. They're sort of peripheral.
Yeah, it's a big picture analysis.
Right. And we tend to want to bring in all these little details of everything that's happening on the peripheral. And the court is really focused on these core pieces.
Right.
Yeah.
And a good strategy that I use to great effect in my own case is, I tell the kids, you respect your mother.
Right.
And if she had a disciplinary problem, I try to carry that through to my parenting time.
Try to back her up.
And I mean, I have selfish reasons. If I'm ever in court, I want the court to understand that I support mom.
Right.
You are never to say a negative word about her in my presence.
Right. Right.
You're not, complaining. And that goes back to the thing we discussed last time about putting the kids in therapy. It's,
right.
Because sometimes the kids do need somebody to kibitz to.
Right. And here's the thing. If there really are things going on in the other world that are of that nature, I find that those things that are like little details that are on the peripheral, you have to show like a chronic long-term pattern of that.
Right. You're
not going to get it straight off the bat, because the courts go, well, these people just broke up. Everybody's angry. Emotions are high. They're going to have some grace at that stage.
Yeah, but frequent and continuing contact.
Right. Right. And so over the long haul, I find the court will figure it out a lot of times when there's nuanced things going on, but that takes a little bit of time. Right. So you have to have the patience.
So I guess if I could summarize the way it is in the analysis, in the vast majority of cases, it's an analysis of the kids need two parents.
Right.
The kids need two parents.
Right.
And they need you to support one another and not have conflict.
There you go.
And that's the good news, because who can control that? You can.
You can. Yeah. Yeah. It's all about your behavior. And I know that's a lot easier rolling off our tongues than it is to say. We've both been in this position. We understand how emotional it can be. And this is really, in my opinion, where the coaching adds so much value, because, your lawyer can handle the legal aspect of your case, but in my experience, lawyers are not going to spend their time trying to teach you how to behave. They're too busy managing your case.
That's true.
You know.
And the other 50 people.
Yeah. And all the other cases they have.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we hope this has been helpful in helping you understand best interest of the child a little bit better. If you are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you get notified as new videos come out. If you're listening to the podcast, please rate and review us. It really helps us out a lot. And also don't forget to subscribe so that you get notified as new episodes come out. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.